Right now, there's a lot of people out there being very undued when it comes to Jim Harbaugh and the whole NFL thing. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that there's a lot of misinformation, foregone conclusions, a bunch of different things that are going on in terms of that. So we're going to wade through it a little bit and give you kind of what I consider the correct perspective on this episode of Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Happy Thursday. We are back and doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I am your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. And I've seen a lot of chatter online just in general in the last couple days. I've been in relaxation mode for the most part, just kind of taking everything in after about 3 weeks of just absolute insanity. And in doing so, I kind of just learned that just kind of where the pulse of the fan base is with Jim Harbaugh. And it's really funny to me because, I mean, some of it is coming obviously from insiders and such. Then there's a bunch of accounts that like to pretend to be insiders and that's not just Michigan, it's elsewhere. You know, I saw something about 3 days ago that said Jim Harbaugh would be announced as the Chargers head coach within the next 24 hours. And then within that time frame, he also interviewed with the Atlanta Falcons, and the Chargers continue to interview people. So the world keeps on spinning as the world turn keeps on happening. And the best way I can say anything here, number one, is nobody knows anything. Not to just continually echo John U. Bacon, who says that all of the time. I mean, John Harbaugh got up in front of the media and basically says, I don't know what's going to happen. Going to do what he feels is best for him and his family. Michigan's brass is going to find a way to get things done, you know, and all of this kind of stuff. But this is a good time for us to kind of have a little bit of a disambiguation. What is happening, what may be happening, what isn't happening as far as it pertains to Jim Harbaugh. Now, first and foremost, you all should be celebrating the national championship more than anything. And regardless of what Jim Harbaugh does, smile because it happened and don't cry because it's over, if it does end up being over. Okay? Where do I stand before we get to all this? I'm at a coin flip, 50-50, whether he stays or goes. Clearly, he's entertaining the opportunity to go to the NFL. And if you believe the Yahoo report, which I do, there is he does seem to want to wait until the NFL cycle is over before he officially does anything in terms of that's when his buyout, he wants his buyout to be reduced or wants his new contract to start with the date that the NFL cycle would be over. So that at least tells you he is at least wanting to entertain the possibility, okay? There were the reports earlier that he and his family would prefer to stay in Ann Arbor. That still very well could be true, but that doesn't mean that he isn't entertaining everything else out there. So first and foremost, here's what you have to keep in mind. An NFL team has to offer Jim Harbaugh. That would be the first thing. And I know there's a lot of people out there that will sit there and say, if he gets offered, he's gone. No, that's not true either. Remember last year with the Denver Broncos, we covered this earlier in the week. Last year with the Denver Broncos, they had quietly, according to some report, I don't remember what, or at least what I had heard, maybe it wasn't widely reported, the Denver Broncos had offered Jim Harbaugh the job last year. Maybe it wasn't formal, maybe it was informal. I don't really remember the actual specifics of that. I just know that it happened. And Jim Harbaugh said no. So remember, the Los Angeles Chargers could offer Jim Harbaugh a job, and he could say no. That happened last year, okay? So the next step would be that offer is commensurate with what Jim Harbaugh is willing to accept, which also doesn't even mean that he would accept it, right? Now, certainly it could be a scenario where he gets offered a lot less than what he is being offered at Michigan, and he accepts it because that's just where his head's at and where his heart is at the moment. And that's fine if that's the case, okay? But it has to be within his willingness to accept, right? You, person with a typical job, doing whatever it is, you say you're happy in your job. You're perfectly happy. But there's another job out there that you're like, man, I would really want that job. That sounds like something that I would want to do. It's similar. It comes with a little bit more prestige, and it allows me to attain goals that I have that my current job does not offer. Or maybe you've already conquered your current goals at your job, and that other job provides you with more opportunities. You might take a pay cut in order to pursue said opportunities. But it's going to be more than just pay for Jim Harbaugh. It's going to be about level of control, because keep in mind, he is the CEO of Michigan football. He has utmost control for the most part. There are certain barriers like the transfer portal and admissions, but that's Michigan specific. But, if he gets a GM that he likes, or, that's the other part. The NFL team has to have a GM that he likes. Now, there's reports of, I believe this is from Chris Ballas, that the Chargers were interviewing Ed Dobbs, who has connection with Jim Harbaugh, and that would certainly be appealing to him, if not outright something that he would say, okay, yes, I don't know. You would have to have, because remember what he went through with San Francisco, ownership, GM, Harbaugh. That did not work out. And going back to point number one, a team would have to offer Jim Harbaugh. You have to keep in mind what today's NFL is. Yes, Jim Harbaugh has been a hot commodity, and for all but 1 year that he's been at Michigan, the NFL seemed to be desperate to get Jim Harbaugh back. But in 2021, he interviewed with one team, the Minnesota Vikings, did not get job offer, remained at Michigan. You have to keep in mind, Jim Harbaugh also knows what it's like to go through the whole NFL grind in terms of dealing with the ownership and the GM, and it doesn't always necessarily line up perfectly. So he's going to want to find that. What I was going to say in terms of the team giving the offer is that the NFL has certainly changed in a lot of ways. This is something that I was talking with Pastor JD about earlier today, and this was something that he mentioned. It's the NFL has moved to a much different model of success. Whether it's an accurate model or an inaccurate model, it does not really matter. Since Sean McVay has kind of taken the NFL by storm, you've seen Matt LaFleur with the Packers. You've seen Kyle Shanahan with the 49ers. It's a younger, more offensive-driven league. Jim Harbaugh, at 60 years old, would buck that trend in both ways. The offense would certainly be dynamic, but would it be what is currently in the NFL? That is somewhat uncertain. That's where, when you look at, the Chargers, for instance, they interviewed Jim Harbaugh. They're interviewing Ben Johnson, the Detroit Lions offensive coordinator, on Saturday. Perhaps someone like him would end up being more appealing to them. So hence, that he has to get an offer part is extremely, extremely pivotal. Because when you see that he interviewed, that does not mean suddenly he has an offer, right? Plus, there's other people who have been in the NFL, who have had success in the NFL, who are interviewing for some of these jobs. Bill Belichick interviewed twice with the Falcons. For instance, Mike Vrabel reportedly interviewing with the Chargers as well. So yes, it requires a team to say yes, but it also requires a team to throw at Jim Harbaugh a lot of the things that he requires. Now, let's get into the flip side of that, the Michigan end, because there is an aspect to the Michigan end. And also, I feel like there's some kind of rumor fodder out there that I just don't feel is necessarily accurate. So we're going to get to that here in just a moment. Before we do that, passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Additionally, at the start of the new year, every small business's owner is asking themselves the exact same question. What's the one move I can make that can take my business to the next level in 2024? LinkedIn Jobs knows your success all depends on the team you surround yourself with. That's why LinkedIn Jobs has created the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. It's very similar to how Michigan, whether it was looking for personnel fits, whether it was looking for player fits, went into their transfer portal, went through recruiting, and built the right team to win the national championship. Now, LinkedIn is not just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. If you want to achieve your goals in 2024, just like Michigan achieved its national championship, guess what? LinkedIn Jobs will help you do exactly that. And it does so by helping you find the right team member. Think about Josiah Stewart making that play at the end of the Alabama game. You can find your own Josiah Stewart. It's why small businesses rank LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn also knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have time or the resources to hire. Thankfully, with LinkedIn, the process is intuitive, quick, and easy. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, so there's a lot more to all of this, right? This has to be a perfect storm. Granted, a perfect storm brought Jim Harbaugh to Michigan, but it also has to be a perfect storm to bring. And the perfect storm feels like it's coalescing, right? Okay. But it has to take a perfect storm to bring Jim Harbaugh out of Michigan, right? He still has kids in school. It seems like they're happy in Ann Arbor. John Harbaugh says as much even today, like, hey, he's happy at Michigan, but he loves Michigan. He also loves the NFL. Certainly if he has the itch, but the question is how strong is that itch, right? Certainly he was feeling the love from at least the fans, the last couple years, not let alone couple weeks. But there's all of this kind of like, if this doesn't get done, you blame Ward Manuel. Blame Ward Manuel. Now, conflict of interest here because Ward's my boy. But at the same time, I have to do a little pushing back on that, just a little bit, right? Because reports have Michigan paying Jim Harbaugh to make him the highest paid head coach in a 6-year period than anybody, okay? So that's #1. And then when it comes to all of these other, quote, demands, the way I likened it when I spoke to Mike Fitzpatrick earlier today is it's one side wants complete loyalty, and that's Jim Harbaugh. But he wants also the ability to look around. It's being in a relationship, but saying like, listen, I am willing to be polyamorous, but I want you to be 100% devoted to me. So, and that's what it is with the buyout thing, wanting to wait for the buyout to decrease, with the start date and the contract, all of that stuff, right? Michigan wants assurances. Jim Harbaugh also wants the assurance that if something comes down the pike from the NCAA with the current cases, that he cannot be fired. There's rumor and conjecture of tribunals and things of that nature. And that all may be true, but what it points to is I want as much autonomy as possible, which fair. I mean, anyone would want that. If you're in a position of power to negotiate your own contract and say, here's everything that I want, I agreed into my mans or I'm walking. Yeah, you're gonna do that, okay? But Michigan is certainly also looking for a little bit of assuredness, right? And there's some of that Jim Harbaugh doesn't want in his contract if he is doing it. Now, Michigan has played the part in terms of at least giving him the majority of what he wants. You have to keep in mind, though, and I understand why Jim Harbaugh would want some assurances with the NCAA stuff. He's been punished twice, and he feels it's unfair, and I agree with that 100%. But if the NCAA decides, okay, 6-year contract, 6-year show cause, just because, they have it out for him, they want to try to get him out, which would be a terrible idea considering how good for the sport he is. In so many ways, it's you notice that Michigan had the most eyeballs on it for The top 3 games, I believe, that were viewed this year were Michigan games. Certainly it helps that it was the Rose Bowl, the national championship game in Ohio State. But nonetheless, he is good for the sport. And the NCAA has a bit of its vendetta and what have you. So if they decide that we're going to go full vendetta, as he talks about revenue sharing and all of that, and gives a show cause, say before the season starts, like, you know what, we find that, you didn't know anything about the Connor Stallions thing, which I'd bet my house on that he did not, that, we're still finding you culpable, 6-year show cause. Michigan would be then on the hook for the most lucrative college football contract in the history without getting any of the benefits of him being the head coach. So you can see where that puts Michigan in a conundrum. I know there's a lot of people out there that will say, who cares? He did what he did. Give him everything. But you have to understand where Michigan's coming from on this as well. So Michigan thus far has capitulated to the points before it's gotten to this point, has capitulated on everything he seemed to have wanted, right? They've continued to bend themselves backwards in order to make these things happen. And I understand if it doesn't get done, you're going to point the finger at Ward Manuel. I just don't think that's fair, right? Because if Jim Harbaugh is so intent on going to the NFL, one way or the other, if it's just he wants to win a Super Bowl, if he ends up taking less and going to the Los Angeles Chargers, what's Ward Manuel going to do about that? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. At some point, especially with a guy like Jim Harbaugh, it's not just about getting what he wants in his contract. There's certain hardware that he wants to own, right? And there's nothing that Ward Manuel can do to say, hey, I'm going to get you that Lombardi trophy, okay? Like, if you beat Ohio State for a 4th year, Super Bowl is yours. That's not going to happen. I'm not saying that there isn't some bristliness and that there haven't been some impediments because of the relationship there. Certainly there is evidence of that, okay? But there's also a lot of historical fiction that has happened and revisionism, because hindsight's always 20/20, right? Back in 2020, it was the right, or 2021 rather, it was the right move for Ward to do what he did. Jim Harbaugh was not performing up to expectations at that time. And Harbaugh can be as mad about that as he wants, but it's as true today as it was then. But since then, has not just met expectations, has exceeded them. And that maybe that makes him mad, and maybe that means that there are certain things, but you can't go back and punish Ward Manuel for doing what was certainly the right thing at that time. He had lost to Ohio State 5 straight times. The team was declining from 2018 to 2019 to 2020. I understand 2020 was COVID year, and you could sit there and say, throw all those results out the window. Okay, yeah, sure. There was still a decline, 2018 to 2019. And there had to be some kind of changes. And with all of that, Jim Harbaugh made changes, completely revamped the staff, which was a big, big part in Michigan's success since then, okay? So, again, I know a lot of you are going to blame Ward Manuel one way or the other. To me, that's just scapegoated. So, I really wouldn't do it. And because if Jim Harbaugh goes to the NFL, Jim Harbaugh has decided to go to the NFL. And likely, there's nothing that Ward Manuel could have done to retain him at Michigan. Because it's not just all about feeling the love, it's also about his pursuit of the Lombardi trophy. So what happens from here? Let's get into that momentarily. Before we do, the NFL season is wrapping up. And there's still a lot of time to get on the action. With FanDuel, that's America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets, guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's win or lose, $150 in bonus bets. It could be as bad or good at betting, and you get $150 in bonus bets with a $5 bet. So many great things about FanDuel, too. App is super easy to use. So many different ways to bet, like live save game parlays. You can find bets in the new Explore tab. Make a parlay in the Parlay Hub. That's the best way to find popular parlays. Heck of a lot more. Get paid instantly. That's the best part. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, so where does this go from here? I do not think this is going to necessarily be a protracted scenario. Maybe it will be. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe by Saturday we'll have a pretty good idea of exactly where this team is. Is it affecting recruiting and all of that? Yes, I spoke to someone that would know. I mean, beyond just someone that's just paying attention. And keep in mind, I'm referencing a person here. And they said, yeah, it sucks, but, for the moment, but, we're not that worried because everything will be settled when we really get into the nitty gritty of it all. With that in mind, there are certain players out there like Jameer Grimsley, who just appeared in the transfer portal. I wouldn't really look at Michigan as being an option there personally, FYI. The portal, recruiting, all of that's kind of at a standstill for the moment. That's the part that really sucks about this, right? This is a point where Michigan could build off of its momentum from a national championship and move forward. Understand that the world is different than it used to be because of NIL, transfer portal, all that stuff. But I was assured that, once they can hit the ground running, they certainly will. And that point will come, okay? There will be a whole spring window and they'll make headway, and you hope that within a month they'll be able to do all of that anyway, okay? So there is that. But what Michigan's got to do is essentially at this moment be patient, because there's a contingency in place, and it's Sharon Moore. And certainly there's chances that you'll lose Jesse Minter and or Ben Herbert, and those would be catastrophic in a lot of ways. But I'm sure that they have contingencies in place even if that does happen, right? The good news is that the roster is, as I poured over the offense, and we'll go over the offense, my starting lineup prediction that I posted on Wolverines Wire sometime over the next couple days. But I feel like the offense is in place pretty well, and Sharon Moore, is almost certainly not going anywhere, and that feels very good. I'm actually kind of salivating a little bit about the idea of having an Alex Orji-led offense, right? Like, I think that could be really beneficial, especially because Michigan does not exactly have a cadre of wide receivers that I feel strikes the fear of the heart of people. I think that Samaj Morgan certainly does, and Tyler Morris is giving nightmares to people in Tuscaloosa. And I'm not saying that they're not capable, but this isn't like what Washington had, of course, or Ohio State. But I still feel like they can win a lot of games with what they have. So to me, a lot of it is stay the course. Now, of course, there's either the band's getting back together or there's going to be drastic changes to some degree. But the most important thing is the continuity of the vision. I'm not sure defensively how that works if Jesse Minter moves on, because you already had Mike McDonald, and then you go Jesse Minter, and then who's after that can continue the vision? I don't know. And if Jim Harbaugh is gone, can Sharon Moore tap that? Go to John Harbaugh and be like, hey, tap, tap, tap. You got any of them Ravens defensive coordinators for me? Right? Like, I don't know. Maybe. But I still think Michigan's in a good place. I think it's being underrated to some degree because, especially with all the defensive talent, I mean, they are essentially running back the same defense. Yes, you lose Chris Jenkins, Mike Barrett, Junior Colson, Mikey Sainer still. That's a lot of loss, but there's still a ton of great stuff on that side of the ball, right? Including the front four, who was out there for that final play against Alabama, right? So, like, it's a really good collection of personnel still. Maybe it doesn't light up the charts in terms of star power, right? You might look at other teams and say, wow, they got a really good defense. Or you look at Ohio State and like, oh, man, they got Travion Henderson and Quinshad Judkins. I still feel pretty good about Donovan Edwards, Kalel Mullings, and honestly, Jordan Marshall. I still feel really good about Colston Loveland. I still feel really good about their offensive line. I feel really good about the defensive line. So it's all about continuity. I'm not saying Michigan's going to be in the same spot that it was this time last year if Jim Harbaugh is gone. But it's not going to be, in my eyes, this massive drop-off unless the vision is blown up and you have people leading the charge that are not able to connect with these people. Fortunately, I don't think that's the case. I think that this is a great situation for Michigan one way or the other. And when it comes to Jim Harbaugh, no one knows anything. People can sit there and tell you, he's gone. He's as good as gone. To me, it's 50-50 at best because you need all of these other things to come to fruition. Like I've talked about at the Open, you need the a team to issue an offer. The offer has to be commensurate with what Jim Harbaugh wants. Jim Harbaugh has to accept the offer. And Michigan's still at play. Not to be Oakland's still at play, but Michigan's still in the thick of this. Michigan can sweeten the deal at any point if it's so inclined. And so far, it's sweetened the deal pretty well, okay? So I know there's going to be a lot of people that disagree. That's fine. And there's going to be a lot of people that say, no, Ward is the problem. And that's your prerogative. But I can tell you that Ward Manuel is not the impediment keeping Jim Harbaugh from being retained at Michigan. It's the Vince Lombardi trophy. That is the impediment. Okay? All right, that's going to do it for us today. We'll be back. Eventually, I'll get to this mailbag that I called for questions for like over a week ago. Will that be tomorrow? Might be. Or we'll talk about current events. Or we'll talk about my offensive, defensive depth charts. We've got lots to kind of get into. So thanks for watching. Thank you for listening. We'll be back soon. Peace.